Hey Fish Tube, Steven here, and I'm on the floor because that is where tank tour number 5 is taking place. You see this tank is on the floor because I have one of those metal stands from Petco for a 40 breeder that sits on top of the stand, and then a 40 breeder metal stand like this actually accommodates a 29 gallon directly underneath it just fine. And so don't want to waste that space, so that's what I've got here. And it is a Pleco grow out, and holy crap, is it a Pleco grow out. Too many Plecos. Way too many Plecos. So anyway, join me on this little Pleco breeding journey, tank tour thingy. And I'm gonna get up now because this is hurting the back and all the things. So yep, here we go. Once upon a time, I was a budding aquarist full of optimism and ambition and rainbows and ponies, and a little bird told me that you can breed plecos and sell them back to your fish store. All you need is a mommy pleco and a daddy pleco, and a cave. The male claims the cave, lures the female to it, fertilizes the eggs she lays, then kicks her out. Kind of a moral gray area, maybe. The male remains in the cave to use its fins to fan the eggs and make sure water is flowing over it at all times, which prevents the eggs from getting fungus until they hatch in a few days. And wouldn't you know it, I tried it and it worked. I had a bunch of little plecos in a 20 tall, but what I didn't realize is that they need food, like a lot of food. The sinking wafers and bug bites I was dropping in there for the adults didn't cut it, and ultimately I had one survivor from that first spawn. About a year passed as other priorities took over, and I hadn't seen Fry in that time and hadn't really thought too much about really trying to breed them again. The male would fan eggs every so often, but eventually kicked them all out. The tank started getting a little more seasoned with mulm, which led to more snails, shrimp, and a few planaria, all of which are known to eat fish eggs from time to time, so I don't think they'd have bred anymore without a little intervention. Then around August of 2020, I was ready to get more proactive about raising a batch of plecos, and so when I witnessed the male fanning eggs, this time I moved the cave with him in it to a breeder box, one of those hang on the side boxes with air-driven flow. Once the fry hatched, I tried to remove as many of the fry from the cave as possible, which is easier said than done, because once the fry hatched, the male is still on duty, so you gotta get him out of that cave somehow. This is a very well-sized cave, perfect width for the male to extend his pectoral fins and lock in place. Once I got the fry into a breeder box, I put the male back in the 20 with the female along with the cave because I'm dumb sometimes. And guess what happened? Yep, more fry. So I put the little buggers in with the first batch. The more the merrier, right? This was a bad decision, brought to you by Stevie B. So anyway, here I was with 150 or so Pleco Fry. For a few weeks, I kept them in a breeder box. Once they eat their yolk sac after a few days, I started feeding them a combination of rapashi and blanched zucchini. More on the food prep later. Then I transferred them to a 29-gallon tank for loads of aquarium insanity. I grabbed a pile of plants out of my 40-gallon mosh pit and threw them in the 29, and decided I would try out a Seachem tidal filter for the first time. And while I really like this filter in theory, it's just not designed for the madness that was to become of this aquarium. I think if there was a way to fully disable the skimmer, this would have been the perfect filter. Anyway, I ended up switching to an Aqua Clear 70 with a big pre-filter, and I had a coarse sponge filter for redundancy. And in the beginning, the plecos were teeny tiny, and all I needed was some rapashi and zucchini on a fork to feed them at first. I also put in about a dozen cherry shrimp to help out with some of the excess bits of food and pleco poop. I tend to put cherry shrimp in just about any tank that will accommodate them because they're like little Christmas ornaments for my plants. Of course, the babies grew, and that forkful of rapashi and zucchini turned into a whole skewer of it, then 2 skewers, and with 150 plus eating, pooping machines in here, the single Aqua Clear and sponge filter weren't gonna cut it anymore. I wasn't getting ammonia, but the nitrites were creeping up to 1 ppm if I didn't change the water more than twice a week, so I essentially doubled up the filtration with a spare Aqua Clear and another sponge filter. Now, as the plecos grew, so did their food intake, and and their poop output and the cherry shrimp population and the snail population and planaria and seed shrimp. Oh, and the pleco population again, because you see, I thought I need to give the male a break. I already have too many plecos, so I put him in his favorite little cave in the 29 with the babies. Well, babies grow up, and I don't know how to finish that sentence without it being gross, but I'm gonna finish it anyway. Babies grow up and the daddy pleco breeds with them. But I didn't separate these new fry into a breeder box, and very few actually survived. It may have been water quality, food competition, or just murdered by cherry shrimp. Yes, I did witness cherry shrimp trying to grab hold of the Pleco Fry one time. Of course, if I wanted to make sure they had a good start, I would have transferred them to a breeder box and fed them separately. And I guess I didn't think the situation was crazy enough, because later I added a few of my yellow tiger endlers to the tank to help control the seed shrimp and planaria. A few. Just a few.
The dumbest fish keeper in the world, Stephen P. 2003. Awkward!
So yeah, if you remember my tank tour and rap song about the 40 breeder guppy mosh pit and how it's actually a natural self-regulating ecosystem, this Pleco mosh pit is pretty much the opposite. Luckily, this tank is a money-making machine, kinda. Plecos, Livebearers, and cherry shrimp are all big staples of the aquarium hobby. The market might be saturated with them, but they're always in demand. So I've gotten to the point now that I've made more than my money back on setting this tank up, and I've just been giving a lot of them away for the cost of shipping, and trading in the larger ones for store credit so I can buy prime and mineralizer by the gallon. What you're seeing here is my Pleco population after I've sold or given away at least 75 of them. And one thing I didn't realize going into this was how inconsistent their growth is. It's not a straightforward operation of simply growing out 150 plecos to 2 or 3 inches and just backing them all up at once. They've grown at wildly different rates because of the initial population density. I mean, using a 29 gallon for this many plecos is a little nuts, but it's doable. My local fish store will buy them all day long, but only when they reach 3 inches. So I've been selling some of them online when they hit the 2-inch range, just to cut down the population and let the little ones grow. At 2 inches, you can't really sex them, which you would normally do by checking for bristles on the face. Males will get them and females won't. On the short fin variety, you can maybe see the development of bristles when they get to 2 inches, but not always. Some of them might not get bristles until the 2.5 or 3 inch mark, which means you won't be able to confirm a bristlenose pleco is actually female until they grow a little beyond that size. That's why you can buy juvenile plecos anywhere for a decent price, but to get them to sexable size requires a lot of time, effort, and food. What I've been doing is prioritizing the more valuable plecos like the long fins and albinos to grow them out. I found it to be worth my while to just give away the short fins just to make room because the long fins are that popular. The breeding pair I use to make this poop and vegetable gumbo is a chocolate long fin male and a chocolate short fin female. No surprise that most of the offspring were long fin, as it's the dominant gene. I'd estimate about 75% of them were long fin. Also, they all pretty commonly carry the albino gene, so I think about 1/3 of them were albino. There are very few of my albino left because they sold almost the instant I put one up for sale. So needless to say, I'll be trying to breed my albino long fins next time. I've been maintaining this tank now with 3 water changes a week. I have to do maintenance on the filter every time. I feed 2 big skewers of rapashi and blanched zucchini every day or 2, and a bunch of French cut green beans. I used to feed broccoli as well, but it makes the water smell like fart, and I don't think there's any benefit over anything else I feed them. I've also fed them raw vegetables before, but boiling them first will make the food sink and thus easier to access. So that's what I do now. If the food isn't eaten after around 30 hours, I take it out. That's also why I kept the tank bare bottom. I'd rather be able to see how much waste is in the tank and just clean it out as needed. The rapashi I feed them is a combination of 6 parts Soylent Green, 1 part Morning Wood, and 1 part of the Spawn and Grow blend for extra protein and fat. I just eyeball the ratio. Now, I've heard some people complain about rapashi and how it fouls their water and it's the worst food you can possibly give any fish. Personally, I've had great success with it. It's incredibly stable in aquariums as long as you make absolutely sure that you A, mix it with boiling water, not just hot tap water, and B, use the 2-to-1 water to powder ratio so it's more dense and less likely to fall apart in water. I let the steaming diarrhea puddle cool on some parchment paper, then dice it up and put it in the freezer. You can thaw it easily in some tank water and you don't really have to use a skewer. I just find using skewers easier to see how fast they're eating and to remove the uneaten food. I keep the temperature at 76 36 using an Aqueon Pro heater and of course a temperature controller. Raising the heat a little might help the growth, but I've been taking it slow. Things are pretty crazy in here already. I have a basic NiCrew light that I've hung from a chain up here. I've spent 0 time dialing in the light settings, nor do I care that there's a window right behind it with no background to block the sunlight. In other words, whatever wants to grow in here to help absorb nutrients, be my guest. And as you can see, the algae is pretty well under control. So just to summarize, if you're interested in trying to breed some Bristlenose Plecos yourself, use a well-filtered tank. High flow is not crucial, but surface area and media for beneficial bacteria definitely is. And don't forget about plants. Get a cave that's sort of tight-fitting for the male to trap the female. A lot of people do multiple caves. I had luck with just one. Your experience may vary. Unless you have a gigantic tank, consider raising one spawn at a time. Sell them off a few at a time when they reach selling size. Feed high-quality food like blanched vegetables, and don't let the food rot in the tank. Put some cherry shrimp in there because a poop factory is their favorite place to breed. Be prepared for and don't be afraid of doing lots of big water changes. And finally, have fun with it. Yeah, I joked a lot about it being a crazy nightmare of feeding and cleaning, but I've learned a great deal from it, and because of that alone, I wouldn't change a thing. If you got questions, leave a comment and I'll answer. I appreciate every single one of you watching this, and I hope you'll consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. Thanks, and see you later.